meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Welcome to the Forgotten Podcast, where we are sharing the stories of the foster care community and offering hope and practical help for the foster parenting journey. Today, I am so excited to welcome my guest, Vania Ferreira. She is married to Rob. She's a mom to many. 4 of those kids she has adopted, and her and Rob have been part of the foster and adoption community since 2013. Now, before we get started today, I do want to let our listeners know that this episode will cover some sensitive topics that may be difficult for some and are not appropriate for younger listeners. So be aware of that as you listen. Well, Vania is here to discuss something that many foster and adoptive families face, but rarely discuss: what to do when your child hurts another child. Vania has walked through really what we would probably think of as every parent's nightmare, and is here to offer us practical help to avoid this and also share some hope for those who are currently walking through it. Vania, thank you so very much for being on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Would you just tell us kind of where you want to start? Tell us about your journey.
We kind of entered into the foster care realm in somewhat of an untraditional way. We received a phone call in late 2013 that there was a kinship placement needed. So after that phone call, I said, well, I really need to we really need to pray. And I need to ask my husband. We had a 3-year-old, 2-year-old, and a newborn at the time. So taking in additional, and my husband was about to deploy. So taking in additional
Oof.
children was something that we really needed to be prayerful of. So after much prayer and the need not going away, we stepped into that, and we took in 2 children, a 1-year-old and a 9-year-old. It was also difficult because stepping in as a kinship placement and not as a traditional foster care placement, we received emergency guardianship. So we didn't go through the typical training. We didn't have the normal support system in place. It was also unexpected. We didn't have family nearby. So we stepped into it without I think, education that I would really encourage all parents who are stepping into this to seek out. So we were poorly prepared.
For those, many of our listeners are well acquainted with that term kinship, but there may be a few new listeners or listeners new to foster care who don't really know exactly what you mean by that. So maybe just explain the difference between kinship and traditional.
So a traditional foster care placement, you're taking in children who you do not normally have a connection to. So for a foster care placement, in a kinship placement, it is somebody who you're related to, or there is some type of connection. So initially, we thought that this was going to be an emergency guardianship placement. When they came in, there was significant fear and anger, frustration, threats, violence, running away. They had been exposed to significant domestic violence and abuse. And so their little bodies just knew chaos, and they desired chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not something that we were prepared for. It was extremely difficult. So we had these small kids, and we are trying to keep everybody safe. But there was running away and chairs thrown through windows, and just a significant amount of violence and threats for safety of the other kids. But we really felt like we were called into this. So and we knew that if we said no, or like it was too much, that the kids would end up going into a traditional foster care placement. They had explained that because we were not actually related to the older child. We were just related to the younger child. They're half siblings. But they had said, you really have to you either take them both or you don't take either one of them. So we're like, all right, Lord, like, please carry us and equip us through this. So the first year I thought was the hardest year initially. But after about a year of consistency, we really saw this huge change and growth, and it felt like our family was finally getting our feet underneath us. So there was more, went from chaos to what felt like calm after about a year. We had seen a huge growth and change in this child, so much so that what initially felt like an emergency placement ended up becoming a permanent placement. And we really thought, okay, this is what our family is. This is what healing looks like. This is going to be great. There felt like there was more trust, and we kind of let our guard down. And then we moved. And one evening while we were tucking in the kids, our child disclosed that that they had experienced sexual abuse. That was my greatest fear, and I think is most parents' greatest fear, is that they're not going to be able to protect their own child from experiencing that. I had also had a pretty extensive history of sexual abuse myself. And so that was one of the greatest fears that I had had for our children. So after they disclosed, called the cops, we made all of the reports. We had agencies come into our home. We really were not aware of what that process looked like. We had to bring the kids to the hospital so that they could be evaluated. We were also investigated. I wasn't aware that that was part of the process, that they were going to interview my husband and myself and also our children, which I think it is very, very important part of the process. But I was very ignorant to what was going to happen after we disclosed, after we contacted the authorities to let them know what was going on. We were thankfully, though, able to get the kids into this program called Bethesda. That program was really vital to our healing and our education. They gave us, they did therapy with the kids. They gave us the tools that we needed. They gave us a support system, other parents that we could talk to who were also going through this, and also the education that we needed, and how to speak to our children about what they had experienced, and also to empower them so that it might not happen again, to give them the tools that they needed in order to stop or inform an adult and to say no.
Wow, Vanya, I know that this is super tender to share, and it brings up a ton of emotion still, and because it's such a tender thing. And like you said, not only was this one of your biggest fears, but it's something you've experienced. And I'm just so sorry uh, that you've had to walk through this and that your child has to walk through this. And I'm just wondering, as you think about those days, I'm sure it felt like a whirlwind, like just like topsy-turvy, like you didn't even know which way was up. And you had moved, so you're in a new place. In this new place, did you have any support? Were you connected to a church family? What did that look like for you?
So we had been attending a church. We had recently gotten plugged in. However, once we found out what was happening, the nature of sexual abuse comes with so much shame and guilt and fear. So we didn't feel like we were safe anymore to go out into the community. Um, this child had vocalized that he was going to actively hurt children again if given the opportunity. So we felt so isolated and alone. And also we didn't want to potentially put other parents in a situation where their child would be in danger or children would be in danger. So we didn't feel like we could access the church anymore. We didn't feel like we could go to community group or Bible study. Um, we really felt like we couldn't we couldn't leave the house at this time, um, because of the nature of what had happened. My husband had actually moved into a hotel room at the time, to separate the children. And then that was only a short-term solution. So we were trying to figure out long-term, what does this look like for us? And because we were in Oklahoma and we were away, we weren't near any family at the time. We had called the state looking for support, because of the age of the child, they didn't want to charge him. Um, but because of his age, there were also no services, inpatient services available for him. So I had called every state to try to find somewhere that would offer him services. But there was nothing anywhere. And because they wouldn't charge him, the doors were shut. Because of that, my sweet dad, um, sorry, he was just diagnosed with a terminal illness. So it's even more.
So sorry.
It's okay. He knows Jesus, and so I'm very just gracious of that. Grateful for that. My dad actually took a year and moved down to Oklahoma to stay in an apartment with him so that we might be able to get him the services that he needed, um, and the therapies that he needed, while also keeping our other children safe.
Wow.
And that was again, just it felt so isolating. And the state had also said, hey, if you abandon this child, you're going to lose all of the children because we're going to charge you with child abandonment. But it's also, if he hurts the other children, you're also going to lose all of the kids based on child endangerment. So we felt like we were in this rock and a hard place with also no support, because they were like, well, we're also not going to charge him, which closed doors to other things. But we were just like, God, I was so angry. I think angry and hurt and frustrated and filled with shame and guilt. And again, like we said earlier, isolated. But during this time, the Lord just kept pressing into me that this child, this boy, is also his child. And God had placed me in a position where I needed to advocate for him, just as Jesus advocates for us. And that we needed to forgive him and love him, just as God forgives and loves us. And that was during that time, that was just one of those truths that I needed to sit with daily, because it was so easy to let my anger and hatred take over, if I'm going to be completely honest, because it is really hard to love when someone is saying that they're going to and want to hurt somebody else. So to try to walk through this tension of protecting but advocating, I don't think that is something that we often talk about when it comes to child abuse. I think that oftentimes there's a lot of emphasis put on meeting the needs of the victims, and I think that that is absolutely 100% part of the conversation. But I also think that part of the conversation needs to be education, advocacy, and healing for the children or people who the perpetrator. Yeah. And what does the forgiveness look like?
I feel the weight of what you're saying. I obviously can't relate in the same way fully because it was your experience, right, that you walked through. Um, but it just feels so heavy, and I can see how it felt so hopeless at the time. And yet I know there are many, many people who are walking through a similar story in silence, um, and haven't shared and are afraid to share and don't know what to do. When you and I met, Vanya, at the field gathering just this year, and the reason I asked you to come on this podcast is because I had just joined the table you were sitting at. It was just a few of us women there, foster moms, adopted moms. And I heard you talking to a gal who was experiencing some similar things or fears around some of this. And the way that you were encouraging her and talking to her, I took note of immediately because I thought, one, you've experienced a lot, and two, you've had healing. You could see it, and you have hope, and you have peace, and you have joy, even in this hard, which I think is just a beautiful representation of what Christ can do for his people. And he's brought you freedom. You have not been in bondage. You're not stuck in bondage to the shame and the guilt because of Jesus. But talk us through the road to healing. How did that look? I'm sure it was a long road. I'm sure there's still healing in various aspects. What does that look like as for someone who is in the middle of the darkest period of their life and feels like they just can't go on?
I think part of it was during this time, I was that we were going through this. I was a Christian, Bible believing, born again believer, and I was like, this just like proclaiming Christ. But it was really in walking through, what does it mean to love your enemy? What does forgiveness actually look like? What does the gospel mean in the midst of hardship? I think sometimes it's easy to proclaim Christ when things are feeling good, but Jesus was really showing us through this that he loved us while we are sinners, and he forgave us first. And that I had this like expectation that he was going to like apologize and be so sorry for the things that he did, but he wasn't. But that Jesus still called us to walk through forgiveness of that. And it was during that Jesus just really brought to light like the gospel is that he brings us out of that. He brings us out of and heals us and loves us in the brokenness. And that he is our strength in that. And so it was really during that time we started memorizing as a family Ephesians 6 and putting on the armor of God, and the belt of truth, and just being daily in the word and daily. Sometimes it was a daily act of forgiving and a daily act of what does Christ-like love look like? Like, and if in my anger and hatred and frustration and my own sin, like letting myself stew in that, if Jesus can forgive me in that, how much more are we called to forgive others? So that was one thing that we just really, really tried to lean into was what does God's unconditional love look like for all? And it was such a joy. We to see our own kids walk through their own faith journey on this. They were very young. Um, but see them just being immersed in the gospel and their healing through education and also empowerment. Initially, it was one of these things that we felt like, oh no, we need to keep this a secret. Like we don't want to let other people know what we're going through. But God calls us to bring the darkness into the light. And so it was one of those things that we realized actually we need our kids for their own healing need to be able to talk about this. They need to be able to say to share their story and share what happened in a safe space. We talked about the importance of, there are certain conversations that are safe to have with adults and other conversations that we don't share with kids. We did so much education on body safety, on boundary rules, um, and really identifying, hey, these are tools that are going to equip you guys now when you do leave our house so that you do feel safe. So that you do feel like you have the tools of if you are ever in a situation again that feels unsafe, what can you say?
Mhm.
What can you do?
Mm, yeah. Giving them some autonomy or ownership over keeping themselves
Yes.
protected.
Yes.
Yeah. Because obviously, as parents, as much as we want to protect our kids, it's absolutely impossible to control everything, right?
Right. So when we initially entered into this, we had told our kids and even through my own experience, we had said like, hey, and again, they were very young at the time. They were 5 and under. So we had told the kids like, oh, don't let anybody touch you. Um, like, make sure you tell mom and dad, like if anybody tries. But we really hadn't given them the voice and the tools of what to do if somebody does break a boundary rule, or what does boundary
Mm,
rules even look like, or what is
mm,
consent? What's the difference between um a secret and a surprise?
oh,
Um,
mm,
so we had, or that like their body is their own and they have the right to say no to anything that feels unsafe. So there was this huge component. It felt very, and I again, it felt very healing once we learned these things and we all had the same vocabulary and grammar. Um, I felt safer. The kids felt safer, and then also being able to share that education and those boundary rules with other parents.
mm,
Because going now into these spaces, it's like it's important for all of the parents, not necessarily to be, I want to say, on guard, but to be discerning and watchful.
mm.
Um, and so by being able to have these conversations and being able to share this education with others, it felt like we were all now on the same team.
Mm, mm, mm,
Because, yep, because before, if you were the only person with part of the information, how can they also be watchful and mindful? If their kids don't have the language to share if something uncomfortable happens, um, then how do we bring the darkness into the light if they don't have the tools and the resources and the vocabulary to share if they felt unsafe or if they felt like something had happened?
You have any specific resources that you would point people to learn some of these things and incorporate them?
So there are so many trainings available online. I know most foster and adoption networks offer training. There are online trainings that you can look at. Some of the things that I would just really encourage parents is um, you can teach your children body parts, all the appropriate names of their body parts from the moment they can speak. Like you can say elbow and you can say breast and you can say bottom and you can use these words, and these words are so important so that if something does happen, your child in the interview, the kids needed to know the appropriate words to use, the actual words to use, empowering them with those words, because otherwise they're having to play out on a doll and show them the different parts. They needed to use very graphic words. So it is important that they know vulva, vagina, penis, just all the body parts, and not have any shame with those parts. Like, this is your shoulder, and this is your penis, and this is your scrotum, and these are the private parts that only belong to you. And nobody should be touching these parts. And if somebody asks to touch your parts, or if somebody asks you to touch their private parts, that is breaking a boundary rule. And just kind of going over, your body belongs to you. What parts of your body are private and only for you? What to do if somebody then breaks those boundary rules by asking to touch, by touching you, by trying to show you pictures, and specifically identifying, these are the boundary rules, not just in our home, but also when we leave our home. And that everyone is held accountable to these rules. And if somebody breaks these rules, you need to stop, go, and tell a safe adult. We often teach our kids, if there's a fire, like stop, drop, and roll if you're on fire. It's like that's the easy thing. But we try to really explain, breaking boundary rules is as is an emergency as if somebody was on fire. So if something happens, if you are uncomfortable, how do you stop and immediately leave that situation? We and then we actually practiced. We said, hey, if somebody asks you this, hey, look at this phone. Oh, look at this picture. Look at this video that I found, and it's weird. How do you leave that space so that you can go tell an adult? We really emphasize the importance between secrets and surprises, how there should never be any secrets that are kept that involve our bodies. And if somebody asks you to keep a secret about a body or about a video, that is breaking a boundary rule, and then you should immediately go tell a safe adult. And the difference between a secret, which is something that's meant to be kept between two people, and how unsafe that is, and the difference between that and a surprise. And really, those are the things that, if you're going to keep something quiet for a short time, surprises are brought into the light, and they're for the benefit and the good of everybody. And it makes you feel good sharing that surprise. But if somebody's asking you to keep a secret and it's making you feel uncomfortable, that's not something that we should keep. Really emphasizing that with the kids. We taught our children, once they started going, once there was some healing, and tools and resources that we felt like they had, and we started letting them go over to other people's homes. We wanted to equip them with a safe word, so that if there ever was a moment where they felt uncomfortable, they could call and say, hey, and then share their safe word or their phrase, to let them know, hey, I don't need to ask any questions. I'm going to immediately come and then pick you up. Also explaining to kids that sometimes the person who you think is a safe adult might not actually be a safe adult, and that safe adults don't break boundary rules. And if there's an adult or a child or a person in your life that's trying to do that they're no longer considered safe. And you need to go find somebody who hasn't crossed these boundaries. Yeah. Because oftentimes we think that abuse happens from a stranger, and that's like the fear. But realistically, most of the time it's an acquaintance, or it's somebody that we know, or it's somebody close. And also making sure that our kids know that we are going to believe them and that they are heard. I think it's just so important, and that that they didn't do anything wrong.
Wow. This is so, so helpful. And so many of us haven't done those things, haven't explained in the depth like that. I just think that that is such wise counsel. And you're doing it from little on up, and it's just becoming as part of your family culture. It isn't like to create fear, is to teach, just like we teach so many things.
And one of the things that we learned through going through this is that there is a significant increase in child on child abuse. Um, Oftentimes, it's that a child has been exposed to something online, and then they're trying to make sense of it. And so then they're acting it out. And they're often acting it out with somebody younger in their community, whether that's a sibling, a cousin, someone in their community group. And I think it's really easy to have sympathy and love for the victim. But I really feel like it's important to share the message that we're also called to love the perpetrator in this. And while our family needed separation and boundaries for our family, and that is what it does look like sometimes for the long-term safety of families, he was also worthy and is worthy of Christ's love, and that Jesus also forgives him. And I just really want to emphasize that there there can be healing. And I think that it is, so while we currently we do not have contact with him. Our kids don't have contact with him. We don't have contact with him. While we were going through this, my dad and my husband really tried to stay active in his life. They really wanted to show him that you were not alone, because the goal is that he has healing and that he doesn't do that again either, right?
Absolutely.
So it's so important that the victims and the children in this and the survivors in this receive therapy, receive healing, receive tools and empowerment. But I think another component to this process is to letting people know that there can also be healing and redemption in in the children and the people who are acting out, and that there is joy, that we're invited into Christ's joy in the forgiveness of those people who are hurting. And it took a while to get there. And I'd say it's only because of the love and the forgiveness of Christ that we've been able to walk through that.
Well, your story is an absolute testimony of the faithfulness of God, and in your pursuit of Him. And thank you so much for sharing. I want you to speak directly to the mom or dad who's had a child in their care who has hurt another child as well. Um, I just want you to finish our time together with just a special word of encouragement directly to them.
I would just let you know that you are not alone, and that this may feel like a time where you are trying to do it in your own strength, but you're not called to do it in your own strength. We're called to do it through the strength of the Lord, and that He is our strength, and that He is with you in every moment. And I would highly, highly encourage you to seek out community, such a, I think our strongest inclination is to not want to share what has happened because it is such a hard thing. It is the heaviest thing to be in community and feel like you are bringing in something that is a danger to others. But the most important part is that if we can all be there to support and educate and encourage one another and give us all the tools, then we can do it as a team. And the Lord is going to equip you and put people in your life who can come alongside you and help encourage you and support you in that. And the greatest way you can do that is by sharing and letting other people know so that they can come alongside you. And that there is healing and love on the other side of this. And that this is not your identity, but that your identity is found in Christ. And that the same thing for the identity of your child.
Vania, thank you simply for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you again for listening today. I hope this episode resonated with you. Let us know your thoughts. We really love hearing from you. And as always, if you want to learn more about TFI, catch up on past episodes, read engaging articles, or partner with us on mission with a gift of any amount, head over to theforgotteninitiative.org. And until next time, remember, if you're feeling overwhelmed, misunderstood, or questioning, why am I doing what I'm doing? Remember, you have a whole community here who cares for you. And even more, Jesus is fully able to meet your every need. Lean on Him and find rest in Him today. I look so forward to being together again very soon.
Resonate.